You have worn two swords every day of your adult life, not for ceremony, not for show. They were the physical proof of who you were. Your father wore them, his father wore them. Every man in your family for 700 years wore them. Today is August 29th, 1876. The government you helped put in power has just banned them. From this day forward, no one outside the army or police may carry a sword in public. Punishment, prison. You unbuckle the belt. You lift the daisho off your body for the first time since you were 14. The weight in your hands feels wrong in a way you can't explain. You set them on the table. You look at them for a long time. Then you walk outside. 2 million men did the same thing that morning. They stepped into a country they had helped create and found they no longer belonged in it. This is how that happened, and it didn't begin on August 29th. It began 23 years earlier, when 4 black ships sailed into a Japanese bay and changed everything. If you want more stories like this, subscribe. To understand what that morning cost, you first need to understand what the swords actually meant. In 1588, Toyotomi Hideyoshi ordered the sword hunt. Every farmer, every merchant, every priest had to give up their weapons. Only the samurai class was allowed to keep them. From that moment on, the rule was simple. If you carried swords, you were samurai. If you were samurai, you carried swords. The two things were the same. The pair they wore was called the daisho, big-small, the long katana, and the short wakizashi. Together, they were more than rank. They were proof that the law worked differently for you. There was a doctrine called kiri sute gomen, the right to cut and leave. If a commoner openly insulted a samurai, the samurai could draw his sword and kill him on the spot. No trial, no real consequences, just a report afterwards. It didn't happen every day, but everyone knew it could happen. And that knowledge shaped every conversation between a samurai and everyone else. The sword was also something deeper. They called it tamashi, the soul. A good blade took months, sometimes a year, to forge. The smith fasted and prayed while he made it. The sword had a name. It had a lineage. When a samurai died, the blade often went into the grave with him. 700 years of this identity, legal, social, psychological, spiritual, all of it carried at the hip. And then the government those same men had fought to create decided to take it away. It didn't happen overnight. It was done carefully, piece by piece. In 1868, the samurai themselves overthrew the Tokugawa shogunate and restored the emperor. They won the revolution. They expected to run the new Japan. They were wrong. The men who took power, mostly samurai themselves, had learned a hard lesson during the Boshin War. At the Battle of Toba Fushimi, a few hundred soldiers with modern rifles destroyed a much larger traditional force in hours. Swords against guns was not a fight, it was a demonstration. So the new government began dismantling the class that had created it. 1869, feudal domains ordered to return their land to the emperor. 1871, kiri sute gomen abolished. A samurai could no longer legally kill a commoner for disrespect. 1872, the old class system was formally ended. Samurai became just a title with no privileges. 1873, mandatory conscription. Any farmer's son with 6 months of rifle training could now do what 20 years of sword practice could not: hit a target at 300 meters. Then, in August 1876, the government struck twice in 3 weeks. First, they converted all hereditary samurai stipends into one-time bonds. For families who had lived on those payments for generations, it was financial ruin. Most received only a few years' worth of income and no way to make more. 3 weeks later came the sword ban. Income gone, identity gone, in less than a month. The class had been patient for 8 years. This broke them. October 24th, 1876, 56 days after the ban. In Kumamoto, 170 former samurai, calling themselves the League of the Divine Wind, attacked the local garrison at night. They carried only swords and spears. Some refused firearms because modern weapons were spiritually impure. They killed the regional commander. Then they were cut down by rifle fire within hours. Every last one of them died. The same month, the Akizuki Rebellion, a few hundred men, crushed in days, leaders executed. Also in October, the Hagi Rebellion, suppressed in a week, leaders executed. 3 uprisings, 3 different domains. all within 60 days of the same law, all destroyed. The government looked at this and decided resistance was pointless. What they didn't fully understand was Satsuma. Satsuma was different. Satsuma had Saigo Takamori, and he had 40,000 men. Saigo Takamori was born in 1828 in Kagoshima, the capital of Satsuma. His family was lower samurai, status, but almost no money, the kind that had to actually be good at the job. He was huge for his time, nearly 6 feet tall, over 200 pounds. People said you felt him before you saw him. He was exiled twice by his own lord. Both times he came back because Satsuma needed him. In the Boshin War, his leadership was decisive. The Emperor Meiji respected him more than almost anyone else in the new government. Saigo became army marshal, one of the 3 men effectively running Japan in the early 1870s. Then, in 1873, he resigned. The government had debated invading Korea. Saigo offered to go himself as an envoy, knowing he would almost certainly be killed, to create a pretext for war. His colleagues refused. Japan wasn't ready. Saigo went home to Kagoshima and opened a school, the Shigako, the private school. By 1877, it had more than 20,000 students across Satsuma. The curriculum, Chinese classics, military training, the old samurai disciplines. Tokyo watched it grow and got nervous. In January 1877, they sent agents to Kagoshima, officially to remove weapons from a government depot, unofficially, rumors said, to kill Saigo. The rumor was enough. On January 29th, his students raided the depot and took the weapons. Saigo had a choice: order them to surrender or lead them. He led. By early February, 40,000 men had joined him, not just Satsuma samurai, men from all over Kyushu who had watched their world being dismantled for 8 years and decided this was the final stand. They marched north toward Kumamoto Castle in their old armor, swords at their sides, family banners flying. The government sent its new conscript army against them. First, 32,000 men, eventually 65,000. Modern rifles, Gatling guns, artillery, warships cutting off the coast. The siege of Kumamoto Castle lasted 50 days. Saigo's forces outnumbered the garrison 5 to 1, but they were already running out of ammunition. The government could resupply by sea, the samurai could not. At the mountain pass of Tabaruzaka, the 2 armies met in 16 days of brutal fighting. In the narrow terrain, the samurai were at their most dangerous. Close combat, where lifelong training still mattered. The government lost around 4,000 men, the samurai lost more. But the government could replace its losses. Saigo could not. Through the spring and summer, the pattern repeated. The samurai would hold a position. Artillery would arrive. The position would fall. They would retreat to the next one. By August, 40,000 men had become fewer than 500. They fell back toward Kagoshima, through the land that had raised them. Their last stand was on Mount Shiroyama, the same hill Saigo had played on as a child. 30,000 government soldiers surrounded them. 6 warships in the bay, artillery on every approach. Inside the perimeter, 437 men. On the night of September 23rd, Saigo received an offer of surrender. The rank and file would be spared. He told his men what he intended to do. At 3 in the morning on September 24th, the government guns opened fire. Saigo led the final charge down the slope. He was hit in the hip. He kept going, hit again in the thigh. He stopped. He had covered maybe 60 meters. He turned to Beppu Shinsuke, one of his oldest companions, and said he thought this was as far as he could go. Beppu understood. He helped his general kneel and helped him die the way the old tradition required, by his own hand, before the enemy could reach him. The rest of the resistance ended in minutes. The war had cost the Meiji government 42 million yen. Japan's entire annual revenue at the time was about 50 million. They printed money to cover the difference and triggered the first major inflation of the new era. The samurai had lost, but they had not lost cheaply. 14 years later, the emperor restored Saigo's rank posthumously. Statues went up. He was called Saigo the Great, the last samurai. The government that had destroyed him spent the next decade turning him into a national hero. The 2 million who didn't die still had to live. The bonds they received for their old stipends were worth, for most families, only a few years of income. After that, nothing. Most of them had never managed money. Most lost it within a decade. The result was so widespread, it got a name: Shizoku no Botsuraku, the fall of the samurai families, a recognized social crisis by the 1880s. But the ones who adapted often ended up running the new Japan. The police force was deliberately open to them, and they were allowed to keep wearing swords. The officer corps of the new army was built overwhelmingly from former samurai families. Ito Hirobumi, a Choshu samurai, wrote Japan's first constitution and served 4 times as prime minister. Oyama Iwao, Saigo's own nephew, commanded Japanese forces in the Russo-Japanese War. Togo Heihachiro, another Satsuma man, destroyed the Russian Baltic fleet at Tsushima in 1905. The class the government abolished did not vanish. It simply changed clothes and kept running the country. In 1900, a former samurai named Nitobe Inazo wrote a book in English called Bushido, the Soul of Japan. It explained the Japanese character to the West through a clean, noble code of honor and self-sacrifice. Much of it was simplified, some of it was invented. The real historical texts of the samurai were far stranger and darker, but the book became a bestseller. Theodore Roosevelt read it and gave copies to friends. It was translated back into Japanese and became the version of their own tradition that many Japanese people came to believe. In the 1930s and 1940s, the imperial military used this constructed mythology as the foundation for a culture that demanded death over surrender and sent men into human wave attacks against machine guns. The samurai class was abolished in 1876. Its romanticized mythology, created in 1900, helped kill hundreds of thousands of people in the 1940s. That is the full cost of August 29th, 1876. Not just 2 million men taking off their swords, but everything those swords became once they were gone. There is a statue of Saigo Takamori in Ueno Park in Tokyo. He stands in simple hunting clothes, no armor, walking his dog. The most powerful government in Japanese history sent an army to destroy him, then spent the next century putting his face on everything. 700 years of a civilization, one law. And a country that has never quite decided whether it made the right choice. But Satsuma was not where the samurai tradition died hardest. 8 years earlier, at the Battle of Aizu, a 21-year-old woman named Nakano Takeko led a unit of female warriors into combat against the imperial army. She killed several soldiers before she was fatally wounded. That story is next.